Shelby County Schools presents Budget Talks.
Hi, and welcome to Budget Talks, a series of conversations featuring our Shelby County School Board members and district administrators to discuss the 2018-2019 school year. This Budget Talk segment features School Board member William Billy Orgel, or Billy as we like to call you here in the SES family.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. You're a member of our SES, Voice of SES family, so thank you so much for spending time today with us. Mr. Orgel, I wanted to start our conversation around the fact that obviously you represent your district, but I wanted to hear a little bit about how that collaboration worked with your constituents to ensure that you are advocating for their needs and what they want for their community.
Well, we've got a lot of aged schools throughout the system. I think I saw a stat 2 years ago that about 140 of our schools were about 40 years or more in age. So, and if you remember, we did a needs assessment where we looked at, we had about $450 to $500 million in deferred maintenance. So we've worked with our partners at the Shelby County Commission, who have been very generous to us in the municipal schools the last 3 or 4 years on addressing some of those needs, plus addressing some of our constituents' concerns with overcrowding in schools, portables, and upgrades that are needed at many of the facilities.
So, Mr. Orgel, that's actually a good segue because you're also the board chair for the Facilities Committee. So can you explain to us a little bit of what that committee actually does and what is the purpose of it?
Well, so the committee has oversight for all the facilities within the Shelby County school system, and that could also include vacant or unused parcels of land. Okay. And so we collaborate with staff led by the Chief Operating Officer, Beth Phelan. She and her staff do a great job identifying needs. They talk to the superintendent, plus the board members have a lot of input on, because they're out there in their districts and in their schools, and some board members have 25 to 30 schools. I've got 9 to 10 schools in my district, and we find needs. So I'll give you a great example of identifying a need. My district does not include Grahamwood Elementary, but it's in Ms. Jones' district. Right. And we've worked together well for 7 years on the board. And we were at an event there, and the parents and the principal, Mr. Johnson, identified some needs. So Ms. Jones and I collaborated, got with the superintendent, and we're doing a classroom expansion at Grahamwood. Well, it's a lot of my District 8 parents that send their students to Grahamwood, but it's in Teresa's district. We saw a need, worked together. Same thing happened at Richland Elementary, which happens to be in my district. Okay. And Kevin Woods sends his youngest daughter there, and we were there for a day. They put planters out there, and they did a community garden, and we noticed the portables. Well, if you'll look in the budget this year, in our capital ask to the county commission, we're getting rid of portables at that school and several other schools because we don't think that's the right thing to do. Actually, we're building an addition at Richland to address the portable needs.
And you're addressing needs from all angles, right? Because in some of the schools that you mentioned, these are higher performing schools where families are flocking to. So you want to make sure that you're expanding that ability of offering more high quality seats to our families, and at the same time you're balancing that equation because we also have facilities that are a little bit older that may need other type of repairs. So I know you and the administration do a good job of balancing that equation and ensuring that you're prioritizing projects based on need.
Right. Well, we need to take care of our students first and foremost and make sure they have a great experience, but it's also a competitive landscape out there. And if you notice in this year's budget ask to the county commission, well, last year's and then including this year's, there was significant money going to Central, White Station, and Whitehaven high schools, and that's because those are higher performing schools, done very well, and we want to make sure that we can compete not only with ourselves, but we've got to deal with the charter schools, which we've got 50 plus charter schools in our community, and some of them are very well funded. Plus, we've got the municipal schools that we're dealing with and the independent schools. So we've got to make sure that our students have a great experience, and that starts with great facilities and teachers and administrators.
Right, so we want to be the landscape, as you were saying, the educational landscape when you and I were probably in school is a little bit different as far as like options that families have nowadays. So you're absolutely correct. Facilities is a way for ensuring that our students have access to good learning environments where they have access to technology and state-of-the-art facilities and all that. So thank you for that. Mr. Orgel, I know you're also part of the work that you do in the facilities, and your role at the board is that you identified some of those big remaining needs that we have. And I know during the summer, their district is actually making some very strategic investments around HVAC and other maintenance needs. Can you elaborate a little bit on what those may look like?
Well, I think it's great to have new facilities, but we need to take care of what we've got in place, and I mentioned the age of our buildings.
Right.
And so I can give you an example, a big one that's going on within District 8, which is White Station High School. And so besides cleanliness, which we got a lot of complaints when school started back in August, one of the largest complaints, and they were very plentiful, was about the condition of the air conditioning system. And actually, I toured the building during the early weeks of August, and I understood, and it's not a comfortable environment. Now, when I went to elementary school at Richland, here in District 8 actually, we had no air conditioning. And in fact, I think the air conditioning program began in the school system in the 1980s and the 90s, and it was done alphabetically, which was very fair. And so if you were XYZ, you didn't get your air conditioning for a long time.
Right, if you were in Richland, it took a little bit.
It took a long time, yeah.
When they got to you, right.
But if you were Avon or Alcid, so you got your air conditioning early, and that's fair. That's a great way to do it. But you got to address those needs. I mean, we're starting school earlier in August, which is a very hot month, but September can also be a hot month.
Right.
So we've got all summer to make sure things are in working condition. We don't want to have a fire drill with our HVAC people in August. We hope we address that with preventive maintenance this summer and make sure that the buildings are all in good shape.
Right. Mr. Orgel, that also is a good segue, because we've heard that consistently through the community meetings that we've had. Every time that we have an opportunity as an administration also to go out into the community, that's something that we heard, that it's a big need for us. Obviously, we want to improve academic and programs and the personnel that's offering support to our students, but facilities and the maintenance of our facilities has always been a concern for our community. So I think it's very gratifying, and I think the audience will certainly appreciate to know that as a board chair for the facilities committee and that the administration, you're really collaborating to make sure that you're addressing all these things. But at the same time, there's a timeline and there's a process, and there's only so many projects you can tackle over a period of time. So that's important to know. Mr. Orgel, how can the community, how can your families be more involved generally in the budget process to make sure that they're flagging things for you so you can advocate and bring those up to the administration's attention, but also just in general?
Well, I think communicating with the board members is very important, and I pride myself on a parent directs something to me, or administrator, teacher directs something to me, and students. I love talking to the students. Direct something to me, I try to see if I can address that. And I think that's, we're not administrators. I can't do anything about somebody's teacher. I can't do anything about their grade and what they got on a test. But what I can do in my capacity as a board member is to make sure that we're following policy and planning well in our schools and making sure. So if we've got a problem in a school with cleanliness, if we've got a problem with school with the air conditioning or the heat, or the condition of the parking lot, those are things that we can address in my committee, because we can fund it and we can request the funding. And that's actually been a sea of change for me. I think after 7 years on the board, and it takes a while to get up to speed, and there's a lot of education can be very complicated. Right. But what I did learn is that as a board member, we do have the power to fund things, and we do have the power to make the decisions on funding things. And it's been kind of a priority for me and from other board members the last few years that, one, we're going to work with our partners at the county commission and ask for the adequate funding for us, which also gives adequate funding for the municipal school districts, and encourage them to update our aging facilities, and if needed, add new facilities.
Yeah, and an important thing that I don't think we all realize is that as a school district, you're not just operating an academic institution, but you're really operating a large company, a large organization. There's a whole operation side to school districts that we don't necessarily hear or learn about learn about it as much as possible, just because of the nature of the work. So that's an important point that you bring up. You also touched on something really important. So you're going to be going to the County Commission for additional funding. We know that as a district, we're making a request about $12.7 million. Is there a capital ask that we're also going to be going for?
I think the capital ask is in the $80 to $82 million range,
okay,
which is more significant than we've ever really asked for.
Okay.
And I think the concern is, if we give you more money, what's your backlog and how are you going to? So we're embarking on a tremendous amount of projects over the summer. It's hard to do large-scale repairs. Additions not so much, but large-scale repairs while you have students in-house.
Right.
But so I believe we're going to ask them for about $80 or $82 million. The municipal school districts, of course, will get a share above that.
Right.
It's a formula. And I think that helps all the children of Shelby County, not just the ones in unincorporated Shelby County and the city of Memphis, but in Bartlett, Lakeland, Germantown, Billington,
Right.
Collierville.
It just helps our community
Right.
in general.
It's good for it's good for everybody. So so we're behind that for all the students in the community, and that means charter schools, whatever. And I was going to touch on one thing. So we don't allocate resources based on success of the school. We touched on that earlier. And so I recall a time last year when we had an achievement school district school, and now we've got Dr. Griffin, who was our chief academic officer heading the achievement school district, and they had roofing problems. And it took us a while to get our hands around it, but in the end, I think the board says, hey, everyone's our student. It doesn't matter if they're in Billy Orgel's district or Kevin Wood's district or Scott McCormick's district. It doesn't matter. And that's why the board members, particularly the facilities committee, we kind of check that at the door and we say, hey, we got to take care of all our students. It's not about what my district's getting or what this district, it's what we're doing for our children in general.
That's a very good point, and thank you for bringing that up, because I do know that each board member and collectively as a governing body, you do take this very seriously, and you want to make sure that all children, and that we are distributing our funding and our resources more equitably across our district. So thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it. We hope to have you back. This is a topic that we can talk about for probably another 30 minutes to an hour, and it's just something that we can always learn about more.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching today's Budget Talks. To watch the full series, visit thevoiceofscs.com.